How's it going, YouTube? It's Pilot Flame and we're back with another video, and today we're going to be looking at Bard and what we can see from it coming in Final Fantasy XIV's next expansion, Shadowbringers. So this is the first of the range that we'll be doing. I thought we were doing Dancer next, but Bard is actually the next one up on the list. So let's take a look at the role actions that they received. So there's a lot of bit of confusing ones in here, but Square Enix did say that they were going to be utilizing these actions. So they have a 30-second bind, silence or interrupt is what they're calling it now, and heavy as well. They still maintain second wind from before on the same recast timer. Peloton or Peloton, not sure how to pronounce that, but it's the out of speed combat buff that they give everyone. And then obviously they received arm's length, which all the physical DPS received is a 2-minute cooldown, which basically makes it that you can't be knocked back, which is super useful. Considering range had to have some wonky stuff where they were the only ones requiring a anti-knockback, so they had to be covered by the paladin when using tempered will and all sorts of stuff like that. So what can we see from Bard going into the expansion? Well, it seems like they're sticking to the same identity, which is very good because a lot of people like the identity of Bard, and they're reducing some of the RNG elements while securing RNG elements elsewhere to make the job feel more impactful in those areas. So what can we see from them? Well, we'll start off with the new stuff. So at level 72, we received the ability Shadow Bite, which is an AoE version of Sidewinder. That was the cool looking one where all the different purpley, pinky looking arrows came rattling from the sky in swift succession. At 74, they received a trait called Enhanced Quick Knock, which adds Quick Knock a 30% chance that the recast timer of Bloodletter and Reign of Death will be reset. So obviously when you're in Mage's Ballad, this is going to be super cool because you're just going to be constantly using Reign of Death over and over again, or Bloodletter. So you'll be constantly mashing that button over and over again. At level 76, you get a Mastery, Bite Mastery 2, which now adds a 35% chance that you will become Straight Shot Ready. And for those that don't know, Straight Shot Ready is now a buff that you receive. So Straight Shot was effectively removed and now made a buff that you can only receive when you get a Straight Shot Ready proc. And it's basically just a ability that just does damage. And what happens at level 70, when you receive Refulgent Arrow, Straight Shot upgrades into Refulgent Arrow. And that'll become super useful later on when we talk about some of the utility spells that Bard can use to become Straight Shot Ready and reduce this RNG factor. At level 78, you receive Enhanced Army's Payon, and it has a long, big text which you'll probably see on the screen right now. So I'll try to break it down as simple as possible. So basically what you're looking at is when you sing Mage's Ballad or Wander's Minuet after you have used Army's Payon and had at least one repertoire stack, you get a buff called Army's Muse, which reduces the weapon skill cast time and recast time, spell cast time and recast time, and auto attack delay for 10 seconds. What you can also do is, if you let the song completely drop off, you can hang on to this buff for 30 seconds, and then when you do enter Mage's Ballad or Wander's Minuet, you can then utilize the repertoire stacks that you would otherwise gain in Army's Payon in your other two songs. So what you're trying to do is obviously get 4 stacks, which gives you 12%, 3 gives you 4%, 2 gives you 2%, 1 gives you 1%, and basically getting as many stacks as possible so that when you go into your Wander's Minuet, which is arguably your highest damage phase, you'll have the ability to just go absolutely crazy and have this steroid running while you're just constantly shooting out damage. Lastly, you gain access at level 80 to the Soul Voice gauge, which is only used for one ability, and every time you gain a repertoire stack in any of your 3 songs, you get increase of 5 on your Soul gauge, capping at 100. And Soul gauge basically allows you to have access to Apex Arrow, which is an attack that delivers potency of 450 to all enemies in a straight line before you, costing 20 soul gauge. The potency increases the higher your soul gauge is when you go to use Apex Arrow. So in an ideal circumstance, you would want to let the soul gauge reach 100 and then use Apex Arrow in order to do the maximum amount of damage. And it is AoE, and it does a lot of AoE with no fall off So it's super good to use it on that. Unfortunately, the soul gauge is, like I said, only used on this one ability, but it's the cool ability nonetheless. It's the one that kind of looked like Hyper Beam in the Job Action trailer. From other Bard abilities, from what we can see, well, the ones that stay more or less the same is you have Heavy Shot, Imp Arrow, Bloodletter, Sidewinder, Iron Jaws, your 2 dots, your songs, Raging Strikes, Warden's Paeon, Battle Voice, Nature's Menae, Troubadour. They all more or less stayed the same. Troubadour was slightly changed. It now shares a recast timer with Machinist Tactician and Dancer's Shield Samba. This one reduces damage taken by self and all party members by 10% for 15 seconds. I believe they all do that now, so there's no picking which song you're in. They just all the range have this ability. And you still obviously have Repelling Shot for the memes to jump off the back of the arena. Another nice change that they also saw was that Venomous Bite and Wind Bite at lower levels is now 30 seconds each instead of being weird timers, so they align with the same timing as Caustic and Storm Bite, which is obviously super nice. I also forgot to mention that at level 76 you also receive an upgrade to Heavy Shot, which turns into Burst Shot, which is does 50 potency more and will be your spam DPS ability, but it makes the Straight Shot Ready proc a 35% chance instead of a 20% chance, so giving you more refulgent arrows. So super cool there. Impure Arrow delivers an attack with potency of 230 like we did before, and it still has the trait where it guarantees a trigger of your repertoire stack for that. And then you still have Pitch Perfect in your Wanderer's Minuet. You still have Bloodletter in your Mage's Ballad with your Reign of Death. And the last major change that Bard saw was that Barrage now, it does the same thing as it did before, where it triples the number of strikes on a single target weapon skill, and additional effects are only added once, with a duration of 10 seconds. However, it automatically grants Straight Shot Ready. So now there's no longer in those, those nice openers where you're sitting there, you're like, oh, a Refulgent Arrow would be nice right about now. It could really come right about now. I need the Refulgent Arrow right now. And then just when you don't need it, it shows up. So now you can force the Refulgent Arrow to come out in the opener, so no more of those crazy RNG openers. Those will still exist, but not to as of a variance that we saw before. Nature's Menae did receive a slight nerf. Its cooldown is 90 seconds instead of 45 seconds. Battle Voice is still on the 3-minute cooldown, and it can only execute on your songs. And then the last thing that's major about the songs, although it's not as major as one might think, but it's still significant to mention, is that the 2% crit buff that you receive while in a song or a stance, whatever you would like to call them, it doesn't exist anymore. So bards have less damage utility in that regard overall. So what can we basically see from Bard? Well, it's going to be a lot of fun to play still. I enjoyed Bard, and as did many other players in the Stormblood era, and we were glad to see that it was more of a Bard and less of a Bow Mage, which was the term that was coined during the Heavens Ward expansion. So they're still going to be super mobile. They're still obviously going to bring the Troubadour style of defensive buff that everyone obviously enjoyed. Battle Voice is still obviously super strong for all of those that can take use of it. Bards still obviously have their various different ways they can deal damage with their constant spam of Bloodletters or Pitch Perfects, and now they have this Apex Arrow to deal even more AoE, and with the changes that we saw for Quick Knock, they're going to be spamming more Rain of Deaths in AoE type situations. They still have their personal steroid and Raging Strikes, which is super useful, and leveling Bard isn't going to be as much of a hassle now with the 30-second buff for both their dots, instead of them being, I believe it was 18 seconds and one of them was 24 seconds, so they were off sync in that regard. And the utility for Bard is obviously still going to be there overall, with them being ranged and everything being instant cast. But it seems like you're going to need a ranged at some point in your party, because this leg graze, head graze, and foot graze from the ranged DPS roll actions seem to be like something that we're going to have to use at some point, similar to how we had to silence, well now it's an interrupt in A6 on, I believe it was Blaster. If you didn't silence the Mind Blast, he let off an ability that basically caused everyone to get confused and effectively wiping the raid. So that's going to do it for this video. I believe Dancer is next on the list. I will just confirm that now. Yes, it is. Dancer is next, followed up by Machinist, and then we'll go on to the melees after that to close it out. So you can wait for that one. Be sure to like, favorite, thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. Definitely appreciating it. We're trying to get on the road to our first set of 100 subscribers, which will obviously shout out when we do so. I'm definitely going to be streaming more for the coverages for when Shadowbringers early access releases or any other further information that we do release. And I'm also looking to do a super late or early stream to see all the final changes that we see in the patch notes leading up to the early access. So for now, it's a good night from me, and until the next video, take care.